Black, Mr. Connor, Mr. Daugherty, Mr. Groan,
Here.
Mrs. Haddon,
Here.
Mrs. Jones, Mr. Keene,
Here.
Mr. Slater,
Here.
Ms. Thomas.
Here.
All right, so the first thing I need to do is on your agenda, I'm going to move some things around. So number 5, pulled policies is going to come to the top. And February 1st reads are going to go down to the bottom. Everything else will stay in order. So if you need to rearrange your stuff. So the first one's going to be credit recovery.
Say that again
Roman numeral 5, pull policies.
now. Right.
It's going to come up
That I got.
to the top.
But then you said.
The February 1st reads is going to go to the bottom.
Okay, Roman numeral 2.
Yep. So I think it was Larry who asked us to bring credit recovery. So Mr. Groan?
My concern is that the district is not following policy in regards to what it takes to be able to enter into credit recovery.
What line in the policy are you starting at? Which line kind of?
Well, when you look at admission and removal, no student shall be admitted to or otherwise enrolled in credit recovery courses unless student has previously taken an initial non-credit recovery section of the proposed course, which is designed as remediation. That's number 2, option for students. And the credit recovery course shall not be the first time a student is exposed to the content, and especially item 3. The student has previously taken an initial non-credit recovery section of the proposed course and received a grade of at least 50%. Students who receive a grade below 50% must retake the course.
Where are you getting your reports from, Mr. Groan? Can you say
Well,
which schools are reporting?
Well, I'll get clarification when Ms. Moody is able to get me the information that I've requested from her. But I can only right now share one instance. A student getting ready to graduate this past May started a credit recovery class on May 2nd. They finished on May 5th. Their original grade in the class was a 2. That's 2 WO. They received a grade of 91 on the credit recovery part. And I don't know whether they received a 91 in their transcript or they received a 70 in their transcript. In total, somewhere over 1,500 courses were made up just at Eastridge High School last year. And I have requested that information for Eastridge High School.
1,500?
1,500 courses made up. That would be 10th, 11th, and 12th graders.
Through Edgenuity?
Through Edgenuity.
Is this example you're giving us through Edgenuity too?
Yes. Now, at Washington Alternative School, my question would be, how many students actually were assigned to Washington Alternative School in the past school year, and what was the maximum number of students that actually attended the facility?
I think we brought you that data at the last meeting, but if I can just remember, I think we had 161 total students that were assigned to Washington throughout the year, and that they never had more than 57 kids on campus at a time.
Okay, and what were the other students doing?
No, the 161 is like, so if a kid comes in August to November.
Were there students assigned to Washington Alternative that were not attending in person?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and these students were at home.
So Washington Alternative utilizes different learning styles. Sometimes they're in, sometimes they're virtual. They do that based on the administration makes a decision based on students. So
But if they're doing virtual, that means they're doing a course online, is that correct?
it doesn't necessarily mean they're solely doing a course online.
But it doesn't mean they are not.
Yeah, I think for the purposes of this conversation, there is a distinction between credit recovery and credit accrual, and Edgenuity can be used for credit accrual. The way it's used and how it's used and the criteria are different, and so you can use Edgenuity for that. I don't know, I can't speak to whether or not Washington is using Edgenuity with kids that are, I don't know that anybody's full-time virtual, but with kids that are virtual and doing credit accrual, I can't speak to that specifically. I could find out.
So the policy says on line 39 and 40, the board shall track students enrolled in credit recovery courses as directed by the Tennessee Department of Education. I know I've never seen a list, so I think what Mr. Groen is asking is for what the policy calls for, that we should be tracking that and we should be getting a list of this. So I think that would be a valid request of the administration to provide all of that information to the board. 'Cause
And I have asked Mrs. Moody to get that information and make it available to the board in regards to, for example, in 2022, there were never more than 48 students in attendance at Washington Alternative School. That's the highest number that was there. Currently today, the vast number of those that are there are actually there for vaping, because we use that as an alternative. They may use that now with our in-school suspension program that we have in 17 schools. And those are all managed by an Edgenuity administrator, or I think the official title is
Choice? Is it choice?
no, it's not choice.
Okay.
I'm sorry, but it's like manager for director of behavioral management. At Eastridge High School, we have an in-school suspension section in a portable, and the other half of the building is for students who are sent there and they're working on Edgenuity. So we have two different individuals there. So we have an Edgenuity administrator who is facilitating the teacher of record who is still in the schools. But what I'm hearing, and what I believe this board is going to hear from a member of our staff at one of our high schools, is that there is rampant abuse of credit recovery. So if over 1,500 courses are being made up at just one high school, I can't imagine how many are being made up throughout all of our high schools, including Washington Alternative. I know that we're set up for virtual education. That's a state law. That is Chapter 0520-01-03. It's under academic and instructional requirements. That sets up a virtual school, which our LEA is responsible for. But if we're allowing students to, first of all, take a credit recovery class, when the rules say that if they didn't make a 50, that they have to take the class over again. And we're allowing them to do this just so we can boost our graduation rate. We're abusing the system. And that concerns me greatly.
On line 75, down there, it asks, It says that the failing grade could also be stated on the transcript, but it's not factored into the student's GPA. Do we do that? Do we put the failing grade on the transcript?
We don't put the failing grade on the transcript. We just put the grade that is earned through credit recovery. And our procedures do allow, and you mentioned that, they do allow for, you don't necessarily get the grade that you earned in credit recovery. There is a highest grade that you can get if you're in credit recovery, but we don't put the failing grade next to it.
Okay, so that, to the board, line 75 says the original failing grade may also be listed. We're hearing from the administration that they don't. So the board can consider changing that to shall.
Why?
Well, why?
I'm just
Number
saying
one,
it's a possibility.
and, excuse me, on line 70 and 71, it says students passing credit recovery shall receive a grade of 70%, not a 91.
Four grades issued up to 2022, 2023.
Yes.
So that's where the state board changed their rule?
Yes, that
And
was,
so
that
we
was
have to
for
honor
grades.
what that is,
For
and then-
grades issued up until, so after the 22-23 school year, students passing credit recovery shall receive a grade of 70,
60.
not the grade they earned doing credit recovery.
It's of 60.
Well,
This-
no, well, now it's
And
60.
thereafter, now it's a
2023, now it's 60.
So are we doing that? Are we following the law in that procedure?
Yes.
How would we know that?
How would we know? I mean, we
If
do.
this board is
Yeah.
supposed to keep track of this, how do we know
This board is not
what
supposed to
grade?
keep track of this.
Yeah,
was
I
in
think,
it.
I think the way I would answer that question is that we obviously train our counseling team on this, right, who manage transcripts, and we have the documentation from when the grades are changed, that's very logged in PowerSchool. Have I done an assessment of the 60s that have been entered into PowerSchool as a result of a credit recovery course? I have not. I don't know that we can run that report, but I think through training, the expectations are clear that that's what's.
Okay,
intended to happen.
I've asked for
Yeah.
a
I-
distinct report is sent from the credit recovery administrator to the
Yes.
registrar,
Yes.
who then changes that student's grade. Nowhere on that report does it show the grade that should be entered. It only shows the grade they made and the grade they made on credit recovery.
So your question is when the registrar receives that information, how do we guarantee that they put a 60 in the computer as opposed to a
Yes.
different grade? Yeah, I would say we do not have a way to assess that. I don't know that there's a report that we can run that can tell us whether or not the registrar is doing what we have asked them to do. You're asking, does that make sense? It's hard.
So
for me to
we're requiring, I'm sorry, we are requiring a certain policy to be followed, and you're sitting here telling us you can't track the policy to
I-
see if it's being done properly?
I do not have a current mechanism that I can assess a registrar's input of a change of grade into the.
So
into
you're
PowerSchool.
telling me is that the only way we can track this is if we have a copy of the email that's coming from the Edgenuity instructor to the registrar of each school, who then goes in and changes the student
No,
record?
I think that we've already said that we have that evidence. What I can't show is that when the registrar did the change, that they made the change to 60. I can say that they were told to make the change, and here's the list of students, and here's the list of courses. We can track that. But you're asking me, how do I know that the registrar made the change that was expected of them? All I can say is that they're trained to do so. We don't have a way to.
Do we have a
You can pull the
way?
grade, though.
You could pull the grade, but you couldn't pull a report to say how many grades were changed and for what reason. Does that make sense?
But the list of students enrolled, you could pull the grades of the list of the students enrolled, and of the 400 employees we have at central office, somebody could make a spreadsheet.
We can get a list of kids that have failed and are enrolled in credit recovery. That's not the question he's asking. He's asking how do we know the registrar changed the grade appropriately? That's different.
Well, it's a separate question.
That's what I'm saying. The question that you're asking, Jody, we can do that, and that's what is stated here in the policy. That we can do. That we can track. But you're asking me, how do I know that the person responsible for changing the grade is changing it appropriately? We don't have a mechanism to check that. That's different. It's two different things.
So we can get a report. We can get a report of how many this past year were enrolled and how many
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer, that request has come. To my knowledge, Mr. Groen, unless I'm missing something, and I'm sorry, I know there's been a lot of requests.
Yes.
That request came today, and so we don't have that information yet. I have to check with my team. If it's not something we have currently pulled, we'll have to figure out what it takes to pull that. And the other thing I wanted to check, and I think maybe here is a good proxy for it, is like the will of the board, right? We just get a lot of requests. We are getting a lot of requests as we continue to go through it, a lot of one-off requests. And so I don't know what we feel about how we handle the will of the board, if it's something like a large request that came in. If it is, absolutely. If it's not, if it's something that's a one-off request, maybe we need to be thinking about it in different ways too. And so that may be something to discuss here is like, is this level of reporting, which is requested in my inbox, is very, very detailed. If that's the will of the board, we can build out that report. But some direction around what is the will of the board versus what is an interest is starting to become something that's more helpful to me in my role.
May I clarify?
Sure.
I would like a list of the students at each high school who enrolled at credit recovery, when they started credit recovery, and when they completed a course. Now, there may be some students that do multiple courses.
So, I'm sorry, a list of students who enrolled in credit recovery when they started and when they completed the course.
And
That
what,
is
of
different
course,
from
what
what
the
we-
course was.
Okay.
I think the only thing I would add here is it might be helpful for us to do a presentation so you can understand how credit recovery is utilized, how Edgenuity is utilized, and why time frames for recovery can be variant. So I think that would be important as well.
Well, I understand, and here's what I can tell you, is that this same student who I referred to that began on May 2nd and finished on May 5th skipped 41 out of 48 assignments and went straight to the unit test. Now, I understand the theory on this, that, yeah, you might have 9 units in a course, and the student might have made a grade below 50, which, to me, they're not even supposed to be in credit recovery. But let's say they did, but in 3 of the units, they at least passed with at least a grade of 60. So they may have some background knowledge of that information, but the theory starts to wear thin if a student failed that class as a sophomore and they're retaking it in Edgenuity as a senior. Now, I know that the district and the administrators at the schools try to get students in Edgenuity as soon as possible after they may have failed a course. But if it's a 2-part course, the way we have set up our block system, where A and B days, makes it impossible for a student to follow the regulations here, which state if it's a 2-part course, A and B, that if they fail A, they can't take B until they pass A. Now, if we weren't on a block schedule, they could do that.
We're on a year-long schedule.
I know we're on a year-long schedule.
Okay, we used to be a 4x4 block, so there's
Yes,
this distinction.
and that's what I mean.
Yeah,
If this was based on a 4x4 block, it means you would see the same teacher every day instead of every other day, then this policy is fine. Because then you can just retake, if you fail a class in the fall, you can take it again in the spring. But under the system we have now, you can't do that.
Mr. Gary?
All right. So the other thing, people that haven't been in a school don't understand credit recovery to begin with. So sometimes students are doing credit recovery on a 9-week, sometimes they're doing credit recovery on a semester, sometimes they're doing credit recovery on a year-long class. They can make an 88 in, let's go back to the 4x4. They can make an 88 for quarter 1 and then make a 2 for quarter 2, and they fail. But they don't have to make up the 88. They only have to make up lessons from the quarter that they failed, not the whole class at the beginning of the year. That is not what the state says. When we're talking about credit recovery, the teacher so most schools, and I can't speak with all, but most schools that are doing credit recovery using the online courses, their teachers select the units that the student will take. They select the assignments that the student will do. They select the quizzes. They select the test. They get to actually, if they want, go in and pick which questions that they want from that test. Now, the perk of the online, maybe more so than the perk of being in class, a student has 3 attempts to pass the assignments or to pass the quiz or to pass the test. And then at that point, if they don't pass it, they have to go back, get a teacher or a director to enter a password, and then they can reset that back to 0 and give them 3 more chances. But again, I have a tough time believing that we have a large number of schools that are being dishonest with credits and with grades and with graduation. Now, I'm not saying that a student didn't go from a 2 to a 70. And the other thing, when you list a grade on a transcript, the transcript only allows 1 grade. When you want to see what the grade was, you type in the date of the previous grading time, and it will show what their grade was when they failed. So there is record, but as you continually upgrade that transcript for colleges and that, if they do a credit recovery, it then replaces the grade, but not at the previous grading date. That date still holds that grade on record. But again, so the question of can you put the failing grade and the next grade? No, you can't. And actually, I remember when we had some professional development, colleges did not want that. They wanted to know what the student eventually made. And that takes me to the point that why would we step on a student? Why would we, if they're working to bring the grade up, now yes, if they're cheating, that's one thing. But if they're working to bring that up, or if they matured before the end of the year and realized, I've got to get this done to be able to walk, then why would we turn around and try to stop that success? That's what I'm going to leave it at.
Ms. Haddon?
I'll just say I'm very familiar with credit recovery. I remember when we started offering credit recovery to begin with years ago. And I do feel like it's used, credit recovery, Edgenuity, I'm saying, not credit recovery. It is used at times excessively. And I know that there are times when students are being tutored through it, or it's hard to know for sure if it is all the students' work. I think it is a great tool to have, but as far as being sure that it's being used appropriately and honestly the whole time, I really don't think that's the case. But it would take a lot of investigation to prove that kind of thing. It is a great tool, but I agree with Larry, it could be used excessively as well.
Mr. King?
So let me ask you, Felice. So then, while you were there, Angie Cass was the principal, correct?
A bunch of them. She's one, yes.
She was one,
Right.
and then right before that, Karen Hollis. And then right
No,
Mr.
Karen was on after.
I'm just going to defer to Mary. We may not want to use individual names.
Okay.
Is that-
All right, so these different principals were there, which it's the principal's responsibility to sign off. Even though there might be a director, it's the principal's responsibility to sign off on credit accrual or credit recovery. So are you saying that you think that administrators are not being honest with those students that are taking credit recovery classes?
Here's what I know as a fact and from my own experience is that there is a lot of pressure on administrators and teachers to pass students.
I never once felt pressure to pass my students. Matter of fact, my teachers would not let me pass students if they didn't do what those students were supposed to do. Now again, small student body, small number of teachers, nothing compared to some of the sizes. So I understand it's harder to lose something in a small school than it is in a big school. But that was the thing that we had going in was that, and I will say this, teachers a lot of times didn't want that student back when you're talking about 2 or 3 years later and they're teaching a freshman algebra class. They don't want a senior sitting in there, and they preferred having them do credit recovery. But again, that's not every case either. I'm just saying that if it's done the way it's supposed to be done, the teachers select the assignments, they select the tests, and then whoever is chosen or being paid, we had an extra contract we paid somebody to do, and they were the ones that reassigned or kept track of who was doing what. It wasn't even the teacher's responsibility. It was the person over ingenuity at the school.
And I don't in any way want to seem like I'm accusing anyone at all, because I was not in your position. I mean, I have had experience or two, but you know, over the many years, you know, I can't say who did what in that role, but I do know, you know, cases, including my own, where there is a lot of pressure. So I really respect your integrity, and I just think there is a lot of pressure. I don't think that integrity is always carried out everywhere.
All right, does everybody
I
get their lights?
would like to follow up, if I may.
Okay, Mr. Grunt?
Well, I'm just saying that there's so much room for there's so much room for just lowering the standards to be able to get kids to pass a class. And I don't think that's what we're supposed to be doing, is lowering our standards. And what good are we doing the student in this, and what message are we sending to all of our other students, the ones that actually go to class and make the grades and end up having, you know, a student who's done nothing until just a few days before graduation gets to walk across the stage too. I just think it's not a good idea. Thank you.
That I agree with you on.
All right, no other lights. I'm going to move on to the next policy, 5.1042, educator diversity. This is on because of a new public chapter, Tennessee Law 494. So the law that required us to have a diversity policy has been repealed. And there's some language in our current policy that can run afoul of the new law. So I know Mary's had a chance to look it over, and Scott, and they prepared me a memo, which I appreciate. And we have a couple of choices here. We have to be compliant by July 1st. Obviously, we don't have to have this policy at all, since the new law says we can't, or we shouldn't. Then we can just rescind our policy. We can just cancel it. Or we can make some really big edits so that the board still has a voice in putting guardrails around diversity efforts. So, but I don't know if Mary and Scott have had a chance to make any edits or proposed edits, but I will just say, because this is kind of a evolving thing from a state level and a national level, I, as of today, am leaning towards, let's just get in compliance with the law, let's, rescind our current policy so that we don't have anything that runs afoul of the new law, and then we can work towards, as we get more guidance from the federal government and state, we can work towards what this should maybe look like. That's rather than coming into July 1st and not having, and being not compliant. So that's where I'm at, but first slide is Miss Felice.
Okay, I'll just, I don't necessarily think we should hire people just to have certain ratios in our system, but I do think it is helpful sometimes with people in certain populations to see an administrator or a teacher, and I think administrator especially helps, who they can identify with, because of their skin color or whatever, and culture, and it really is helpful sometimes, to have someone of color in most, I'd say every school really, or the ones, because it's hard to explain, but it is helpful because they know maybe they think that person maybe understands them better or something. So in that regard, so maybe a revision, and sometimes I've been very thankful for some of our administrators of color who've come to IEP meetings and all, and people feel like there's someone there who relates to them and that they respect in both ways. They're respected as well.
I will say this, if we don't have a policy, we still have anti-discrimination policies, which is, we're not gonna do that. We're not gonna discriminate, but it's just, we need to get advice. I want the whole board to hear the advice of Mary and Scott, on this as to what we should do, but let Miss Jackie speak first.
I know this is a touchy subject for a lot of people because of the climate within the nation, not just Tennessee. And so everybody wants to get rid of these words called diversity and what that may look like. But I would just like to, I don't think you would even need these policies if people would do the right thing and put people in places, based on their qualification, because there are a lot of minority people that I know are even more qualified. If Hamilton County begins to do the practice versus what this says by doing what's right, I don't think I would have a problem with this not being in existence. But I don't see from my just observation now where I think Hamilton County Schools does the right thing when it comes to 45,000 students. What is the percentage of African American, Asian, or minority students that are there, and what are the percentage of principals or teachers that are within our school system that look like them? And I think it is, for me, to fall into a climate or a culture where, because everybody else is doing it, we wouldn't even have to have these things if everyone would do the right thing. But for me, when I look at what Hamilton County has, when we have 2 African American principals of 45,000 students and all we have is 2, you don't tell me there are not any qualified other African American male. And I can only speak on African American because that's what I am, right? We have several assistant principals, right? And I'm not saying every African American person needs to come through this Hamilton County system needs to be in leadership roles, but we need to have a fair representation in these schools, throughout these schools. And I don't think I see that. I'm going to continue to do my due diligence by continue to research and observe to actually get a clear number of what does that look like for minority principals and leadership. What does that look like here in Hamilton County? Because you can have this program, but if you're not doing the practice or anything for it, I guess the policy doesn't even need to be a policy if you're not doing what it should look like. And that's just my opinion. I just wanted to kind of state that for the record, because I do feel, and I've said this to Dr. Robertson as well, for me, I want to see what it looks like. I don't want to see all of these supposedly programs that you're saying that's in place, but yet the people that you said they're in place for are not being able to utilize them or not being accepted into them. And what does that look like? Because all of the promotions that I saw this year are majority white females. Yes, they are the top of the DEI program, so let's make that clear. But where are the other minorities when you're talking about promotions in Hamilton County, what that looks like and what it should look like? And I don't think we're getting a fair representation, so that's why these policies exist. And I just want to state that for the record. I think we need to do a better job in our hiring process and who's promoted and how that's promoted. So my concern is around the human resources of it and how does this process work? How are these choices being made? And that's what I want. I hope we create a policy to look at. And maybe we don't have to have however this is written, but I would love to see people that are of other races represented in Hamilton County, of the 45,000 students that we serve.
Thank you, Ms. Jackie. The current policy has some language in lines 13 through 16 is kind of some of the biggest lines that could run afoul. And one of the issues is it talks about the goals. And I don't think this board's ever heard the goals of the administration, but I'm gonna let Miss Mary talk about that.
Sure, and just for the sake of clarity, we do not make employment decisions based on race. We've never done that. We don't hire or terminate based on race. This policy, as Madam Chair said, our policy is modeled after State Board Policy 5700, which was just repealed by the Public Chapter 494. What the primary goal of this policy is to set forth, the importance of attracting a wide and diverse pool of applicants, so that we have a lot of qualified people with a lot of merit to choose from all walks of life. And so that's really what this policy is designed to do. It's in terms of basically probably the most appropriate word is like recruitment, and that's really what it's geared toward, and sort of putting that to paper and sort of setting the criteria for it. Madam Chair, you just mentioned lines 13 through 16. And yeah, I think that in looking at those do talk about goals, and it talks about create specific goals, but it doesn't really speak to what those goals are. And I don't recall the specific conversation from 4 years ago when this policy was adopted, but this could be something that of all of the language in this policy, I think these 4 lines possibly are what jump out as maybe the kind that may need some reworking or reconsideration in light of this new public chapter.
So kind of what I'm hearing from the board, and I don't see any other lights, is we want diversity, but we want to make sure that we're in compliance with the law, and we wish everyone would do what's right and everybody on their merits. I think that's the heart of everybody on this board. But maybe we could do some amending and bring it back so that we do have some guardrails, and I don't think we should use the word goals or we might, not be compliant. But if we can work on that, is everyone kind of just with a nod, are you in agreement with working on that? Or if you'd rather just rescind it, someone needs to let me know. Joe?
I think this kind of goes back, and I appreciate what you just said, Jackie, about we shouldn't even have to need this. If everybody would just do the right thing. I think that's what I heard you say. And Larry talked just a minute ago about his concern about, maybe some administrators or some folks were not being fair or were cheating is what I guess what I heard you say, Larry.
No, I didn't say cheating. I said-
Well, but that's what you're inferring, that somebody's
No,
not
don't
being
put words
honest.
in my mouth. I'm
Uh,
saying that we are lowering standards.
Okay, oh, okay. But to me, it just seems like the world is about trust. And nobody trusts nobody. I've never seen nothing like it. Nobody trusts nobody. Jack, you're absolutely right. If we just do the dadgum right thing, and maybe I'm just a naive old man, I don't know. Maybe that's who I am, what I am.
So are you saying you think we should just sit and have the policy and we should just do the right thing?
That's where I'm at. I just think we ought to do the right thing. And I'm like Jack, if we just do the right thing, put the right people in the right spots, why would we be possible?
Well, I know it's not a voting session, but we kind of need to give some direction to Mary and Scott. So it's not an official vote, but can I get some kind of a indication from the board? Miss Mary, how do we do that?
Now that this law has been passed, what are other districts across the state doing?
Well, and that's a good question, and I'm not sure, candidly, I'm not sure. I know the state board policy will be going away or has gone away, because it was effective whatever day the governor signed it, which was sometime in May. So I'm not quite sure what others are doing. I haven't really seen any guidance on that, but, you know, we can certainly come up with some suggested revised language and see what the board thinks, and then.
But if the board doesn't even want it, then I don't want to put you through that exercise. I did ask Ben Torres, and he said, well, I think a lot of boards are just going to get rid of it, and that's the TSBA. But I want this board to speak, Can we do some kind of unofficial yay or nay?
Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with you all coming back to advise us on what other boards are doing. I would be curious to see whether are they getting rid of it? So I would be interested in knowing that from the attorneys to see what does that look like worldwide? Is the language changing in some of these things? But if it's not on paper as far as a policy, how will we address individual issues when they come before us? What guidelines will we have to go by and to look at?
Well, we have our anti-discrimination policy, for sure. Is there any other, Mary, that comes to top of your head that would answer that question? Like, what else do we have to rely on?
No other policies are jumping out at me right now. That's not to say there aren't any. I just can't, they're not in my head. But to answer your earlier question, we can't take any kind of a vote.
Okay.
tonight. Yeah.
So if maybe you just bring that back and let us know what others are doing.
Well, so I'll certainly make inquiries and see what we can find.
My issue is July 1st is coming, guys. We have to be compliant by July 1st. So we'd have to get an answer pretty quickly.
I think, yeah, and so
Heard
we
you,
can
Jackie.
certainly be quick about that and follow up as soon as we can.
Can I just add one more thing related to what Jackie just said? Because I learned something just a minute ago that I didn't realize that. And I see Zach sitting back there, that we only have 2 minority principals,
Two black
2 black male principals.
But we have more black females, though.
Significantly more. I don't know the numbers, but I think it's significantly more.
But only 2 black male principals out of 70, how many schools?
What about our
70.
Hispanic
76.
principals
How many Hispanic, okay,
And
great.
or-
How many is?
and our
Yeah,
assistant
how
principals?
many,
We have 2 Latinas principals.
yeah.
I mean, we could go with 3 black males because we're making Harrison Bay, Future Ready Institute, we're moving those from coordinators to principals on the elementary scale, so you could go with 3. But still, I think the point you're making is
well taken.
It's very few, right? Is of Washington, and that is, yes, that's true.
Have no idea.
All right,
At the
Felice?
same time, we can't twist people's arms and make them want to go into education just so we can satisfy some diversity quota.
You can, but you can also put barriers in place where they cannot be promoted and they're not promoted. And so that's what, as a Hamilton County School Board, we need to look at. What barriers are being in place? Why are some of these assistant principals being assistant principals for 5 or more years and can't move up? What barriers do we have in place as the reason why they can't? Because we're changing policies and procedures within our own ranks, within this board, that creates that barrier. And I'm just being honest, I have a problem with that. And so, and not to.
Where do we have a barrier?
Well, for me, and I've discussed that barrier. There's a barrier when it comes to your training programs. What that looks like, yeah, you're supposed to, because I think you mentioned it before, have these special training programs. But if systematic things have changed where it becomes a barrier where you decide who goes into a program and they're not allowed in, why will you keep applying to be a part of something? But that's a different, we'll be getting into a wholly different thing, and I'm not trying to make this a long night. All I'm saying is this is an area we need to look at. And I can only speak for me and what my district area looks like, and that's where they all tend to be in one lump area, as though we can't manage in other areas, but that's a whole new story for me. But I'm just saying that's an area we need to look at, and when you get rid of these policies, if you're not following them anyway, you might well get rid of them. That's what I would say. But I just think that's an area we need to look at, and I'm just giving you the numbers that I'm aware of Larry, and it's passionate because, yeah, they look like me. Yeah, I would want my son or daughter to see somebody that looks like them, because we're very much capable, we're very much educated, we're very much able to do the same things others do. Oftentimes we're doing more of it because we're in the lower level, the assistant, than we are as the principal, but we're still working as a team doing the things and we shouldn't be overlooked, is what I'm saying, just because this is now a new requirement that you have to do. I just have a problem with that, but that's my issue, and I know this is a whole board of 11 people, but we need to begin to address some of those issues. That's all I'm saying.
But Ms. Jackie, are those policy issues or are those administration issues?
Well, I think it may be procedural issues, and that's what I'm not sure on. So when I get to speaking on it, because I'm passionate about it, I don't want to just jump the gun and say that's not the way it is. That's not fair to them. So I want to learn to see what that process is, what that looks like. And yes, I probably will question some of those things, but I don't think it's something that I'm ready to say right now for the board until I talk to those that in charge that can explain it to me, make me understand it clear why what we have looks the way it looks, and that's all I'm saying.
Okay.
Well, I really, Dr. Brown, I just have a hard time thinking that there's some systemic way that you're discriminating against those who, might be considered minorities, and you're somehow putting a barrier up to keep them from attaining a higher level. I just have a hard time.
Well, I didn't say Dr. Brown was
believing
doing that. And because Dr. Brown looks like a minority doesn't always mean he doesn't control the systematic way things happen. So I'm not by no means attacking Dr. Brown in regards to this. What I'm saying is we need to look at the policies and procedures to see if there are barriers. And if there are barriers, those barriers need to be removed. That's all I'm saying. I'm not accusing Dr. Brown or anyone else in the department of intentionally discriminating against someone. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying what the facts are. And the facts are we have 2 African American males that are principals. Yes, we do have African American females that are principals. But there are other barriers, Larry, in my opinion, that needs to be addressed. And I plan to address those concerns. I'm by no means accusing Dr. Brown over there of being discriminatory against minority people. I'm not accusing him of that. But in listening to the procedure, there's a systematic thing that could possibly be changed. And that's all I'm saying.
Okay. I'm going to move on. I think we've discussed that one a lot. We're going to hear back from Mary and Scott on kind of what other boards are doing with this change in the law.
Can I
oh,
share one positive?
Yes, I'm sorry.
All right. So it's in its second year. It's actually starting its third year, the Tennessee Coalition of Colored Teachers, which started and and that's an organization here in Hamilton County I know Chattanooga State's one of the sponsors, UTC's one of the sponsors, but what is our tie-in with that, Dr. Brown?
I'm not sure if
Okay, so 2 years ago, so going from when I was working with Grow Your Own to then coming to the board, we had just started the Tennessee Coalition of Colored Educators. And
Can we correct you right there?
yes. and the
Tennessee
title-
Educators of Color Alliance. I think
Thank
is
you.
what it is.
That was, and so now we're starting the third
Who
year
came
of
up with
that.
that title?
And the idea behind it is that not only, there's fewer
I think we should.
fewer people of color going into the field of education, even by percentages than normal. And in the first 3 years, there's more dropping out of it. And the idea behind this organization was to give them more support, especially within their first 3 years of being a teacher, so that because, and again, there's fewer educators in schools, so there's fewer bonds that form necessarily with, just like students want people of like, color to be teaching them. Sometimes teachers want people of like color to be able to confer in that. So this organization was set up 2 years ago to help try to save people from leaving the field, because there was a higher rate of I hate using, but teachers of color were leaving at a faster rate than non-teachers of color. So this was there to be a support and to be a thing and really kind of a mentoring type program, even though they were all on equal fields. But UTC, Chattanooga State, Hamilton County, I was a part of it from the Grow Your Own, was there to try to make things a little better during those first 3 years. So it'd be nice to maybe hear from that organization with regards to their feeling about this too. To ask them, have they seen barriers, or what are barriers if there are? Just out of curiosity. But it's not a question. I knew I didn't have the right title.
I would just say that.
I haven't worked with them for 2 years, so.
Yes, sir. I would just say that, we didn't create Example, we partnered with Example, and part of that was really, we wanted to make sure that, we wanted input from our teachers. That's why we wanted to make sure how we retain our teachers. So we partnered with them so they can, a third party to talk to our staff to figure out what we can do better, just as overall recruitment strategy or retention strategy across the district. Throughout that, we created affinity groups and networks. And that was just partnering with Second and trying to gain input so we could continue to be, people out here in Point Valley who want to retain our good staff. Thinking about our teachers, male teachers of color, that percentage is a little less than 3%. Right. So think about overall, we have very few male teachers of color in our system.
Larry?
I know I'm asking, have we had like professional development or support services for these teachers, these MTOCs and FTOCs? Have we had any these affinity groups that you're speaking about? Are we bringing them together at a district level and providing them with meeting times, or are we facilitating that through HR?
Yes, sir. As part of our strategic plan, Opportunity 2030, one of our strategies for our employees' professional growth development, we do that through our LEAD program,
which is why we're now utilizing, of course, you know, I remember being a first-year teacher, and, you know, I had a mentor. He always got me in trouble. But, no, and we're having these groups to be much more supportive of all new teachers, because there's so many. We've done very well on retention, especially over the last 6 to 8 years, much better than we had before. But, you know, you get a lot of loss of teachers when they, you know, within 3 years, when they hit the reality of the classroom. It's totally different than your Department of Education at college. So thank you for your effort in that regard.
Okay, going to move on, but I first want to note that our chairman is wearing Miss America's glasses. He's wearing pink flapper glasses.
Yep. You're exactly right. We're out of it.
Okay, policy 5.200, which there's 3 of these together. Can we talk about them together? 5.201, 5.202. Suspension, dismissal of non-tenured teachers, tenured teachers, and classified employees. And, ooh, the lights are on. Mr. Slater.
Thank you. First of all, I love that imitation of Elton John.
Too much glasses.
Put those back on, Joe. Atta baby. I've had 2 teachers suspended in my district this year, both from the same school. I know I had a one-on-one meeting with Dr. Brown about one of them last week, and everything is fine. My issue is how they were treated when they got suspended out of the school. In both cases, they were taken out during school time, through the halls, through the kids, through the other teachers, not told what was going on. And I just think that the teachers ought to be treated with a little bit more respect. And as far as this policy goes, there needs to be, and I'm not an attorney, but there needs to be something in there that says, okay, if we're going to suspend these teachers and take them out of the school, it needs to be done through their planning period and out a side door. I mean, to me, it's just disrespectful. Whether they're guilty or not, that doesn't matter. I think they need to be treated with a little bit more respect and a little bit more dignity when we're going to suspend a teacher. Tell them why they're there, and tell them, you know, we're going to go out through this side door, take you to your car, so the kids don't see you being taken out. To me, it's a matter of respect and dignity to those teachers. So if there's some way we could put into that policy 5.200 to do that, that would make people happier, I think. So
Well, does not lines 22, 23 kind of supposed to do that, Mary? Provide written notice?
well, it wasn't done if that's the case. They were taken out during school through the halls.
So lines 22 and 23, and I'm just to orient us, I'm looking at 5.200 specifically. That is under when the director has determined to suspend someone for 3 days or less. So that would be when the person at the end of the investigation, that's speaking to when the person gets notice of their discipline. Now, there is an initial suspension letter that all employees get. They don't get it the minute they necessarily physically exit the school, but they get their initial suspension letter informing them that they've been suspended for the reason and what the parameters of that suspension are for the pendency of the investigation.
So we don't have anything in our policy that is kind of procedural as to the initial due process, the initial, you know, that's what's going through my mind is due process.
In terms of what Mr. Slater just,
Yes.
I don't believe we do, no. And
Is that something we can look to maybe address?
I think we certainly can look to it. You know, I think it kind of, one potential complication there could be just that a lot of these situations are different school buildings, different environments, different circumstances. There are many different reasons someone gets suspended, and there may be various senses of urgency with regard to some of those suspensions. So it may be difficult to have something within the policy that we can successfully apply in every situation. So I mean, it's certainly something we can consider. In a hard way, I mean, you said seemed disrespectful, and so you're asking, is there a way to do it that's more respectful based on what you've heard? Is that correct?
And also, the 2 times that it happened, the teachers didn't know what was going on. So at least some sort of verbal communication at the onset would say, hey, here's why we're doing this. And it could be, 10 seconds of here's what's happening. So at least they know.
It may be that this is something that may not be able to be, or may not be best utilized by putting in the policy, but it may be something that procedurally administration can consider and work through.
I think that's where the rubber is meeting the road here.
Yeah,
I think we need something in the policy to make the board members feel more comfortable in that procedure.
some sort of procedural guidance.
Okay.
Could it be done in a more respectful way? So,
By the way, the meeting I had with Dr. Brown was great. He handled it very professionally. And thank you, Dr. Brown, for handling that very professionally. How's that?
Jackie?
Oh, I was just reading this, and I know teachers can be suspended for various things, but when it comes to different charges, especially when it's related to child abuse, I know sometimes teachers are suspended, and then it may be the whole year, and they're not back in their school. But sometimes that has to do with how DCS investigates and how long they take their investigation, and until that investigation is complete, they're not allowed back into the school. But I guess my concern was in here when that happens. I know it says with pay or without pay, or their pay is reinstated. I guess they go back. Unless suspension without pay or some of all of the duration. I guess those things are how do we determine, and I guess that's a question I have, suspensions without pay. What does that look like when they are suspended without pay? Does anyone know? What is, Dr. Brown, do you know? When they're suspended without pay, what would be the difference of suspended without pay and just suspended until the investigation is complete?
I'm going to allow Mary to answer the question. She's got a great
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Basically, so just to give you a brief overview, when this happens, an allegation is made against an employee that warrants them being suspended so that HCDE can conduct an investigation. They are suspended. Everyone who is suspended for purposes of an investigation is suspended without pay. Everyone is suspended without pay. And then and that continues through the duration of the investigation. And now, if it's just Hamilton County Schools conducting an investigation, that may be a very brief period of time. But to your point, sometimes depending on the nature of the investigation, we have to notify DCS, we have to notify law enforcement, and then their investigations take precedence. And so, to your point, those investigations happen, and depending on many factors, they're very busy entities. People who investigate have caseloads. Sometimes they just take longer than anyone would like, and it's no one's fault. It's just kind of the way it is. So when those entities are involved, though, the timeline is a little bit longer. And then when their investigations are done and our investigation is done, Dr. Robertson determines if the person should be disciplined in any way, and that discipline can vary widely. But if let's say, and this is just a pure example, at the end of an investigation, he determines an employee needs to be suspended for a day. Well, and but the investigation took 3 weeks for whatever, you know, because we had DCS and law enforcement involved, or it just took that length of time. He submits his decision in writing. There's a meeting with Human Resources, and then the person gets back pay for all the other days that they were out at the end of the investigation, minus the 1 day that they were suspended. So they get in their next paycheck or the next couple paychecks, they get the pay that they weren't paid in real time during the investigation, minus the whatever the amount of pay is that corresponds to the suspension that the director of schools determined to give them. That was kind of wordy. I don't know. Does that make sense? Did that help at all?
It does. It does help, but yeah, it helps. But I know what that can look like for teachers who about like everybody else, paycheck to paycheck, and you ain't getting the money. I mean, I'm just saying you're pretty much at the end. It's determined that, you know, the allegations were untrue or whatever. So okay, I was just curious. Thanks.
Ms. Haddon?
Okay. Due to multiple situations this year, I wish to discuss the employee suspension policy because I'm aware of quite a few employees who have been suspended or have been suspended this year, who are or have been. Most of these employees have been referred to outside agencies and are or have been under investigation. I'm trying to be very sensitive, privacy, for the privacy and all. It is common practice for employees to be suspended while under investigation, but in some of these cases, the charges are minor, whether they should be charged at all, and maybe cause no harm to students. But the typical time allowed for an investigation is 60 days, I understand. Almost all employees have been suspended. Almost all the employees, or some of the ones I know, have been suspended without pay. And after a certain amount of time, within the 60 days, they lose their benefits within the 60 days. I know employees who've had to, or either currently within the 60-day period this happened, without insurance or purchased COBRA, their own insurance, during the 60 days. I know of some employees who have been suspended well over the 60-day mark. It was extended. And after intensive investigation involving multiple interviews, research of records, and studying videotapes, there are still no substantiated charges that have been presented to these employees. Most or all of these employees have served our school system for many, many years without incident. There seems to be no end in sight, while these employees are missing house payments, losing their insurance benefits, as I just stated, and their licenses are either suspended or in jeopardy. I did hear that once. I haven't followed up to check for sure, but, you know, I know one is like, I don't have my license. I can't even apply for another job. I guarantee you that these employees are not feeling valued. In our suspension policy for certified teachers is an alternative placement option where teachers can be assigned to a non-student facing position while receiving their pay and benefits. Our system has used that policy in the past, and I will say I've talked to Dr. Robertson multiple times, Mr. Scott Bennett multiple times, and Dr. Brown multiple times in regards to these issues because it's a long-term ongoing situation. We've used it in the past. I have urged Hamilton County Schools to employ this policy while investigations are going on, but they have chosen not to. Considering that some of these employees still do not know of any specific charges against them after a lengthy investigation, I think this is totally unacceptable. What would happen to any of you if you lost your job for months with no charges that you know about against you? This would obviously most likely cause anxiety and depression. Not only that, I feel like there could be some preferential treatment because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that there's been at least one employee given an alternate placement this year. Others are or will wonder if this is fair. How are we deciding whether or not to give an alternate placement with pay? I'd really like some answers, and I urge this administration to provide an alternate placement as soon as possible for these employees who are suffering.
So, to that degree, Miss Mary, that's policy 5.201, and it's alternate work assignments from line 30 to 37, if the board members are trying to follow along. That's where it says they may choose. So I guess the question would be, should we work on that language?
Just if I may make a couple points real quick. Actually, just 49.5.511 directs that these investigations should not exceed 90 days in duration, and that's
90?
It's 90, and that's
Okay.
if there's no law enforcement involvement, and so that 90-day time limit does not apply when we've had to make reports to DCS for law enforcement. So the 90 days is for when just the school system is investigating, and just for the sake of clarity.
We know that DCS is taking an exorbitant amount of time. We know they are not, I mean, they've got lawsuits all the time. I've worked with DCS. We know they are not the best managers of how they do their investigations. So I think it is a legitimate thing, a little bit question of should we revise the policy because it's taking them so long.
Well, where we are is we're really not, I mean, this is a longstanding directive. We really can't begin our investigation until theirs is done. We just cannot. And you know, and I can't speak to, obviously there's a lot of confidentiality there. I can't speak to the workings of their investigations or why they take the lengths of time that they take necessarily. You know, again, just I know that they have substantial caseloads and things of that nature. But in terms of our longstanding and what we've been told, and how we've managed this is, when we have to notify DCS and law enforcement, our investigation doesn't begin until theirs are closed, and so we really can't modify what we do without getting in their way or risking getting in their way, and that's just something that.
But the suspension with pay or the alternate work assignment, so some of those, they may not be able to be placed on an alternate work assignment. Is that right?
That's right, and that's my understanding. And Dr. Brown may be better able to speak to this in general, but I will say my understanding is, in most instances, alternate work assignments are just they're not available for whatever reason, or it's just not workable. And I don't know.
Yeah. You know, I would just say that most of our cases, they deal with students. And so all of our locations, there's kids. And so if you have to be removed from students, we have limited spaces to consider. You know, so I guess I'll leave it at that. Where you have to remove a teacher from the classroom, because their job is to serve students. Talk about expecting your day and employee. I just throw it out there. We had a bookstore. Is that how you employee go? Man books. I'm not sure. So again, it's there, and I've had this discussion with Dr. Culbertson. How do we respect our teachers? How do we deal with situations that we have to make
And Ms. Schaefer, just to speak on, you mentioned suspension with pay. And we, to my knowledge, as long as I've been involved in this, suspensions have always been without pay, and that's what's recommended. And the main reason for that is that it would be very difficult to find ourselves in situations where we've paid someone and then it's determined that they should be suspended for some length of time as a discipline or terminated, and then we have to try to get that money back. And that's why, that's the rationale.
And I get that. I guess it would be good to know what kind of alternate work assignments we actually have. I mean, I'm sure it is limited because you can't be around children.
I can tell two that used to be used. Now, this is a long time ago, but they used
Speaking to your
to,
mic.
Yeah, people can't hear you, Gary.
they used to put people in the mailroom or help them, the pony, what's called the pony, the inter-system mail, they would put them at those because that didn't involve student contact. I even know at one time where they put them at maintenance and had them help maintenance. Now that again, you know, you're not gonna put somebody as a plumber if they don't know plumbing, and, you know, but I'm just saying, there's been things done. But my question that I was gonna ask, which really, I did not realize that you can lose your insurance during this time? And is that because they're not getting paid, so then Blue Cross or Cigna is canceling their insurance?
You know, we're self-funded, right? And so when you say self-funded, they have to, and typically, you know, going back to the amount of time that these investigations take, there's a handful of people that fall in that category where their premiums stop, right? They're not in paid status, we're not putting towards their insurance, they're not putting towards their insurance, so it's on hold, but of course, they still have all the rights that any other employee will, but they're given alternatives, not the best, where they could, in theory, elect to go through the COBRA route.
So if, let's say they do that, yeah, it's expensive, but if they do that, and then they're found not guilty, can they be reimbursed for having to take the COBRA?
Yeah, when we, you know, the employees found, unfounded, when we say retro, we make all that right.
Okay, so they are reimbursed then, okay. And I guess my question is, so when we negotiate with Cigna or Blue Cross, can we not put in a 90-day, so if it's a 90-day maximum thing, can we not work with them about putting in a 90-day, I forget what the term is, where they can't cancel until the 90th day?
And that's a great question. I can't speak, and I have to, give Kenny Murray, but ultimately, we're self-funded, so think about insurance, and we are going to continuously pay for active employees. So if we have an employee that is not active, and we put, you know, Cigna, Blue Cross, they're active, we've got to pay that. So asking them to give us, they would say yes, as long as we pay for the, premiums for that.
So the answer is yes.
I would just say we go by active and inactive. So what happens is this employee is not active, so therefore we're not going to pay, we're not going to pay tax, right? We have district premium, and then also have employees premium as well to, I will say this, that ultimately, you know, when it's all said and done, from my standpoint, very few people fall in that category, because typically, if an employee is, removed, it's usually a month and a half before we can get to that. And I would say, oftentimes we're able to, resolve the situation, unlike, I understand what Ms. Evans talking about, we have a situation that's extended, that's out of our control.
But we're choosing, you just said we could pay for their insurance, but we're choosing to not pay for inactive employee insurance.
I would just remind the board that we're 12.6 million, you know, increase in insurance this year. So,
But it's just a handful of people.
those employees, when they're suspended without pay, they're inactive. So, and I would just go back to, only thing I would say, Michelle, would be back to the fact that if for whatever reason they were found guilty, then, the board would have to
I didn't, you know, of all these years, I did not realize that you could lose your insurance during that. It's common sense, you know, that you're not gonna get paid because of how hard it would be to try to recoup the money after, and then you're paying even more for a legal battle. But to lose your insurance during that time, that's just wrong.
So I will say this, that we work with our employees, and, you know, fortunate enough for our district, if there is a situation that they need to attend a clinic, that is a perk. And so they're able to go to the clinic as long as they're coordinated with us, so that is a perk. So they can get some, you know, immediate care. It's just if they have to go to the hospital, that's a different story, right?
Okay, so if they're on medication, they can also continue to get their medication?
Well, again, the cost might be different, but I'm just saying, like, Zach Brown needs to go see, a medical professional who work in that.
I'm gonna just say, I've tried to get into the clinics. It is not easy. Just want you to know that. It is not easy to get into the clinics to get an appointment for me or my kids. Yeah, now, the text thing where they do the teledoc, that works, but get an appointment, not so easy.
Well, text, they should create a form for you to text.
Yeah, but it's like a week. It is not immediate.
I would talk offline.
Okay. But I have concerns that we could absorb, if it's a handful of employees that this occurs to, there is a potential that this board could decide to absorb that cost of insurance. And that's not a paycheck. It would be a much more minimal cost than trying to go back after back pay. But if the board decided, Mary, am I right? If we were decided as a board, we wanted to absorb that cost for a longer period than 60 days, could the board put that into the policy?
That would be a budget item, wouldn't it? Because it'd be cost to it.
Without names or anything, could you show us either this school year or previous school year? Let's say we did that, how much that would have cost us? No names connected, just all right, so 12 people during the year, this amount of money, you know, just a,
We could budget for it.
right, so that we would know kind of ballpark what we're talking about. Is that something that can be done? Or would that be through HR?
Sure, Shannon, you're the data queen.
I would say you could turn that off as a catch. I would say you could ballpark anything, right? That's the budgeting process. It would be a ballpark. Like, what's the cost of it, insurance per employee? I'm probably speaking into Zach's realm. But from a budgeting perspective, you could
It would
assume.
give us an idea.
Right.
Hey, it could be one of those others that's in the budget currently. There's quite a few of those.
So, back to Gary's question. If the insurance runs out and they go get private insurance, we reimburse them for that cost.
I'm not able to speak to that. I will say what I know for sure is if they have to go through the COBRA route, then we will work with that. Private insurance is something totally different.
But it's still out of their pocket. That's what I'm saying. If they,
What we ask the employee to do, and I always make sure we articulate to the employee, is to reach out to benefits so they understand the situation, they can advise them. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but we always ensure and make sure the employee knows who to contact so they can discuss.
so that's a maybe.
So would
Sorry.
it not be easier for them to just pay the payment that the board, that the school system generally would pay for that particular month in their premium? Wouldn't that not be cheaper than the COBRA?
Oh, yes.
Well,
Could they do that?
It's a great idea.
if they have access to that, if they need,
Okay.
you don't have to pay for it unless you need it. You know, I'm just, one of those things that your insurance runs out, you have time frames to go back if something happens, right? So you know, reiterate that.
I like that idea, Jackie. We could let them pay their premium
Yeah,
versus having to get
because that
COBRA.
happens like when, I'm just using myself, but when I was out and had no more leave, had exhausted all leave, and I know it's different, I wasn't suspended, but I was able to pay my own premium, to keep my insurance, so my insurance wouldn't lapse, because I had no more, any more funding to pay it, so I was able to pay it on my own, but it may be different.
Felice?
I was just saying, you know, in most cases, I would think when someone has been accused or suspended, you at least have an idea of what it's about. You know, if someone did something that was wrong or how bad. Some of these employees
let
have
me-
no idea.
Let me say this, I just can only speak from the standpoint of DCS. You are very much informed what the allegations are. Nobody can, I mean, I'm just, with DCS, you're informed what the allegations are. Now, they may not come and interview you right away and all of that, but you know what the allegations at least are. Now, they may not be telling you that they know, but they generally know what the allegations are. Now, I don't know about how the school works as far as if it's a violation within the school. Because the people are going to be trying to contact you to interview you because DCS, you know, the biggest concern with DCS, I would think they would have if they put them on their register, they very much would lose their license. If they indicated them as a perpetrator or incident indicated, perpetrator indicated, then they very much would be put on the register and they would lose their license anyway to teach in
Our
Tennessee.
policy says for us that they're provided written notice, including the reasons for suspension, along with an explanation of the evidence.
Yeah, you have to tell them.
May I respond? I know this has come up a couple times, but I am 99.9% confident every employee that's been suspended, I or the staff, we clearly articulate the alleged allegations. Now, I understand that, you know, oftentimes this is a tough time. And so employees, they hear things and they don't hear it, right? And so we clearly verbally make sure the employee understands what's the alleged allegation. And then we follow up with a letter that states the same thing that we communicated to the employee. We don't go into depth because we're not investigating. If DCS or police are involved, we're going to allow them to do their thing first. But I just want to reiterate to this board that 99.9% of the time, our employees are fully informed about why they have been suspended, and then I'll follow up with a letter to reiterate what's going on. So just want to be clear.
But
You know,
we could allow them to pay their insurance premiums so they don't lose their benefits, or we could choose to absorb that cost,
yeah,
one way or the other, if we chose to put that in the policy.
that is something clearly I don't mind, you know, talking to our CFO about and just seeing what that could look like. I can't speak on that because one is we know they're in unpaid status. And so, you know, I don't want to say yes to something that I just don't know, but that is definitely something that I can talk to Mary Ellen about and say, okay, what would that look like? What could that look like? Could the employee opt to pay the full premium, right? The district's premium as well as the employee. That is something that we'll take back and we'll get some information for you.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful to the board.
Last thing, I promise. That would be a tenth of what COBRA would be. As a former insurance agent, I know what COBRA costs, and it is astounding. So if there's any possible way to do that inside Hamilton County Schools, that would benefit the suspended teacher immensely.
Especially if they're in the back.
But I think the bigger issue for some of these employees, and they might be that 0.01%, that don't know the charges. But not being allowed to have alternate placement over this extended period of time when they're losing, they can't make their house payments. That's months is a long time for some people to go without a paycheck.
It is.
And I believe that if we wanted to make it happen, we would make it happen for them.
I want to respond to Mr. Slater. Mr. Slater, I just want you to know that, this board is very generous to our employees when it comes to premiums. I believe COBRA, that is our complete amount. That is the employee and the employer. That's why it costs so much. It's just, we have a board that's very generous to our employees that pay a high, significant amount of the premium. So that's the total cost. So I just want to remind that cost would need to be paid regardless. It's just, I believe the board covers probably 89% of the premiums already, so.
Joe?
Nothing to do with the policy. Out of all the allegations, people that are charged or suspended, how many of those, what percentage of those prove to be found guilty of what they've been charged of?
Yeah. Here, I think I'll answer it this way, is, first and foremost, our job is to make sure we, one, take care of our kids.
That's right.
Want
That's
to make
right.
sure we have the right people in front of our kids at all times.
That's right.
And then we want to make sure we take care of our employees the right way.
That's right.
And we want to set everybody up for success.
That's right.
So I will say that, there's three facets. DCS, there's laws. Law enforcement, they've got rules. And then we have a code of conduct, right? And I will say more times than not, there is probably something wrong. They probably didn't break there's not a law that's been broken.
Yeah, you're not answering my question.
But
You're not answering my question. Now, those people that are suspended, how many of those prove to be appropriate suspensions? Whether it's appropriate with us or with DCS or with the police department or whoever. How many of those? What percentage of those? Or what percentage do we have to say, you know what, we were wrong, Mr. Brown, come back to work tomorrow?
I don't discuss personnel issues. I could tell you
That's not a personnel question, Zach. That's,
In other words,
I would say,
ballpark figure
yeah.
on 100%, 2%, 1%.
I would tell you that on a whole, if we say we have 6,000 employees, right? We have less than 2% people that even is in this situation. So probably 1.5% is really what we have to deal with throughout the year.
that 1.5% that we have to deal with,
Which would be 90 people.
okay, so how many of those prove to be?
I'm having a hard time answering this, Mr. Smith.
I don't see why that's a hard
Because I'm
question.
not sure if we're defining suspension versus a reprimand. I really can't categorize it. That makes it difficult for me.
Is the question how many of those result in some kind of discipline from the school system?
That's my
Is that the
question.
question? Whatever it may be,
That's my
reprimand,
question. That's-
reprimand to
Yeah,
termination?
yeah.
I don't know that you track that necessarily, but I don't know.
But
I'm not
If
trying to
you-
put you on the spot.
would you like me to answer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would say
very
60% of those, there is some form of discipline.
Okay, all right, thank you. You answered my question. Thank you.
Jackie, your light's still on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. All right, so you're gonna bring us back possibility of what we asked you about. Okay. All right, moving on.
We kicked that one.
5.803, evaluation of the director of schools. So 803, and along with this, I have provided you in the left side of your folder a copy of the director of schools contract, which I don't know if the new board members had. It took me a while to get it myself. And I provided you a sample from the Tennessee School Board Association of an evaluation form. I provided you last year's form that we did in December. And then Shannon provided the responses from the director of schools. So you have a lot that goes with this policy that we are looking at. So,
Yeah, it's on your.
yeah, you have them. It's printed. They provided all of us. No, that, you're looking at laws. Look in the other side for your policies.
Yep, and I looked through it and never had that particular one. Got a lot of other ones.
I probably have an extra copy. Okay.
Here. Right there.
Right, but that's not the policy. Oh. You were.
Okay. So does everybody have all, you have the policy, you have the director of schools contract, you have our sample evaluation form that I got from the TSBA. You have our evaluation form that we used last year and the director of schools response. So when I was reading through the policy, I noticed the timeline in the policy. The timeline talks about it should be done by July. Well, we didn't do that last year, so we did it in like December. And I remember Miss Jackie saying, this time frame doesn't seem appropriate, because Miss Jackie said it should have been done before the new board got elected. But I know, I'm gonna get to it. The contract, which is why I provided you the contract of the director of schools, talks about the evaluation form. Well, for one, the format has to be agreed upon by the board, all right? So that's why I provided these samples. We've got to get an evaluation form.
I can help you with that timeline if you want.
But it's about being the data is received from the state. So there's a little bit of wiggle room in the contract, which has not been shored up with the policy. So those two timeframes are a little off, and that's why the contract speaks, since it was the last thing this board voted on. So the contract timeline kind of speaks. So my question is, we have TCAPs back, so we know we have achievement data.
We don't have achievement data yet.
So what is included in achievement data if it's not the TCAP?
We don't have TCAP information yet. The first thing they do is release third grade scores, right? So they can do that for
I have both my kids.
Well, that's fantastic.
No, it was
They
in
might
their
release it
grade,
to
it was
you.
on their grade cards
Oh,
at the end
no,
of school.
you got their quick scores. Yeah, we do not have achievement scores back. Quick scores are something that the state turns around very, very quickly. That is not tied to what their proficiency is. And what we do in our policy for the board is use it's not coming to me, it's like a average methodology essentially to say whatever the average raw score was for that grade level in Hamilton County, we apply a grade to it. It has nothing to do with proficiency.
And when does that come back? It's not December.
October.
This year, it's not December. This year, it'll probably be closer to August, but it depends on when, each year the state has to do like a reevaluation of scores on their testing, and some of them get delayed till November, which is actually, I was actually here kind of looking somewhat in this role when they adjusted the timeline in that policy to begin with, to be aligned to when the data comes back, because of it being so late for so many years that we just had no data to put into the evaluation. This year, it's on a regular timeline, which will be more closely aligned to the end of summer, early beginning of school year.
Okay, so we can agree we're gonna do it before December. I don't know about before a new board would come on, Miss Jackie. How do you feel about that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was reading. What was the question?
So you remember when we did the time frame, you said this time frame should be done, this evaluation should be done before the new board comes on, and that's how the policy reads. But they're saying the data is what prevents that from happening. They're saying we should have it earlier this year than we did last year. Could be August, so we could do the evaluation in September, but it still would not be as early as, you had mentioned.
Well, I just didn't like the fact that I had to come in and evaluate. I think with me having been on the board for a year, I may be able to be differently because I've been able to monitor and watch the process or whatever. So that was my concern, then. But, somebody else comes in after whenever I leave, I think they may have the same issue if it hasn't been changed before then.
Right, well, so the policy fixes it, but it's the timeline in the director of schools contract and when we get the data back that's causing the problem. So I don't know. Joe, what do you have to say?
I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think we kind of got out of kilter when we did his contract, and it was a half a year. Weren't we, as I recall, we were kind of messed up with regard to how when we first brought Dr. Robertson on and how we constructed that contract. Marion, am I correct about that?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
And then we went back sometime later and we fixed that. it's fixed now, but I think that might be where some of that confusion was.
I just think we should do it as soon, as
I agree.
close to the policy as
I
possible
agree. I agree.
with the data. We should not wait to December.
I'm
Since
sorry,
the-
where does it say December? I'm just not following.
No, it's when we did it.
Oh, I see.
So it should be closer to as close to the policy date as possible with the scores coming back, the data coming back.
Or change the policy.
Our
I don't
policy
wanna
does
change
say
the
as quickly thereafter as possible.
Seemed like we didn't get those TCAP scores.
We
till
didn't this year.
late
Standard setting is the
October.
word I couldn't think through.
T-Boss was late this year, so
Yeah.
achievement came in that August.
They went in,
T-Boss was November.
I thought it was October or something like that when we got.
T-Boss was November, yeah.
Well, we should just do it a little bit earlier, but that leads me to the biggest issue, is this evaluation form. So the timeline of when we do it's one thing, but the evaluation form is the bigger monkey. And so I've provided you what we used last year versus I got from the TSBA, theirs. And if you compare the two, theirs is a lot more comprehensive. It's 1, 2, well, no, really, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11,
14.
12, no, 13. Really, 13 pages of evaluation versus what we had was just a couple of pages. And I didn't like this form last December. I didn't think it really hit on the things that it should have hit on. I'm proposing we use the TSBA's form, and what I'm told is that it also aligns with the principal evaluation form. So I'm providing this to you now so everybody can start looking at it. And we need to vote on this. Obviously, we have to work with the director of schools. He needs to have a chance to review it himself per the contract. But
Would
this
Would
board,
this align with his current contract with the, and goals and expectations that we set for him? Would this instrument align with that?
what goals and expectations, Joe?
That we have set for the superintendent in terms of graduation rates, in terms of growth?
You talking about the board goals
Yeah,
policy?
Yes.
Well, we need to work on, that's on for tonight too.
Okay.
So we need to work on those two things. We need to make sure we can align the board goals policy to align with our evaluation document.
Is
And-
everything in this one included in this one?
You mean everything in the TSBA?
Yeah,
No.
are these
No.
areas, they're totally different?
They're totally different.
And why is A not here on this one? So on the back page, the very first one is total mean school board relationships, but there is no total mean school board relationships. A is missing.
Well, this is just the form that provided to me from the TSBA. We can revise this form in any way we want to, Gary.
Well, I'm just saying, they didn't send, TSBA did not send A.
Yeah, what's the first
which is-
page?
Which is the very main.
Oh, it's the way she copied it, because I have it on mine that I printed at home.
Oh, okay.
Oh, okay.
Yes, you can email the electronic version to everybody.
All right.
It's there. So I didn't know what you were saying because mine's there. Mine's looking at my copy. I like how it's very itemized, the way the TSBA did it. I like it. So I just wanted to provide it to you guys so that you guys can start to look at it. But we also need to talk about the board goals policy, and we can draft it to mirror this. And I know right now it's kind of drafted around
2030.
the 2030 plan. But I like this better for an evaluation purposes.
Very detailed.
It's very detailed, and it answers, there was a lot of concerns I had that that is drafted around the 2030 plan did not address, that we did last year. So,
I
yes, Jackie?
I guess my concern would be, and I guess it's a question, how would changing what the 2030 plan, whether I agree with it or not, how would that change the dynamics in the midst of what they're doing, what they are trying to achieve those goals? What does that look like as far as if we decide to change all of these goals, they're working on these goals, and now in midstream we're stopping it. I just, what would that look like?
I don't,
And they may be similar goals.
yeah, I don't know
that's
that they're
something
very
that-
different,
Okay.
is where I'd go. I don't think they're very different. But that is my request of this board, is to kind of look through this TSBA, look at the board goals, and we need to speak as a board to these are two very big items. It's some of the biggest things that we do as a board. We're not giving our superintendent clear direction without board goals, and we're not giving him clear evaluation without a more thorough form.
Look, I like it.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr.
Well, I agree. I
Chairman.
think this is something that we need to work on.
What'd you say?
I believe that, yes, this is something that we need to take a look at. And, you know, it allows us to hone in on certain areas and be very specific
Dr.
about,
Robertson seen this?
I don't know that he's checked his email on vacation. I just sent it today. I just got it from TSBA, preparing for,
I like it.
as I wanted to give us something, and they're our source of where we get that something from. And I liked it when I looked at it. Anybody else have any thoughts or comments about that?
I kind of like the one you presented. It's a lot more detailed. I like that.
So what's our next step? You gonna have him look at it and then we're going?
He has to look at it per the contract, and then we need to vote on it.
Are we looking at it with possible changes or as is? What are we looking at when we look at it? To accept it as is or with possible changes? If we see something on it.
If you see something, Miss Jackie, and you want to change it, of course we can discuss it.
Okay.
It's got to be the whole board agreeing upon it.
Okay, I didn't know if we just looking at it too.
And I will say the contract with the superintendent, it encourages us to come to a mutual agreement, but if there is no mutual agreement, then the board speaks. That's what the contract says. So now we're moving on. I'm gonna just go ahead and pull that 1.7, this is school district goals, because it goes with this, guys. This is something we've been working on since that fall retreat. And we haven't made any progress. But now that we have this evaluation form, maybe we can try to mirror the two, like Joe was saying. Mary, is that something you can help us with?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
So will you help us kind of look at this? Did I send you the form? Okay, Shirley's gonna send you the evaluation form from TSBA. And we need to revise this school district's goals to kind of mirror that so that they go together. I don't know if there's a way, Mary, in looking at this, that you can still be under these, every student learns, every student belongs. I know it's probably a really big lift, is what I'm thinking.
Happy to give it a shot, absolutely, yeah.
Okay. Is, So that way it would tie the 2030 plan and the evaluation form together in the board goals, and that would be the most clear direction. Okay. That takes us to 1.404, appearance before the board. This was a first read. It's going to be on for second read. This is where we changed the minutes from 5 to 3, and then the 2 minutes, we can ask them questions. Is there any comments about this and the red lines? Steve?
Yes, ma'am. If we're going to do what the Hamilton County Commission does, we need to add, if you're speaking on the same subject, you got 10 minutes. Because we could have 10 people speak for 3 minutes each on the same subject if we don't have this in our policy.
Okay.
I don't see it. The 10 minutes for each subject.
Right, and if
Maximum.
there's 10 people, they all could stand up, but they have to elect
Yeah.
who they want to.
So it's
That's
not
what it
in
is
here.
at
We
the
need to
commission
add that,
meetings, yeah.
Mary.
I agree.
So we need to add that language.
Do we want to say if more than one person, because that would be, or do we want to say, so if every individual gets 3 minutes, if you have a group, with some,
Three or more?
Same topic.
The same
It would need to
subject
be,
is what the Hamilton County Commission says. It says the same subject.
so if it's
You-
2 people,
you've got-
2 or more,
yeah, but then we're
Okay.
giving them even more time than the 3.
right,
3 or more.
3 or more.
3 or more, okay.
Yeah. That makes more sense with the 3 minutes.
Problem with that, whoever gets up there first can take the whole 5.
We've
They
seen
not
that.
doing it,
No, they only
That's-
get 3. First one only gets
Joe
3.
cuts them off.
I'm saying, you know, 10 minutes, maybe.
Okay.
And they, as a group, they can elect one person to speak all 10 minutes.
That's right. That's right.
All right, so we're moving down to 3.402, special use of school buses.
Everything marked out.
It's all rescinded?
Those are, yes. So we are rescinding these 2 policies, that's why it's all red line. They are in the, I'm speaking in areas that aren't mine, but they are in the manual for the owner operators, so it's redundant to also have them in policy. Did I do that correctly, Mary?
That's exactly right. 3.402 and 3.405 are largely, almost, they're basically in the transportation manual, which is on the website. It's 50-something page document. So what was in these policies is covered in the transportation manual. So this is just trying to simplify and take out what we don't need. Or rather, what's covered elsewhere.
Okay. It's not being duplicative.
Exactly.
So that takes us down to 6.201, compulsory attendance.
So what?
6.201.
Compulsory attendance.
There's just, why'd we strike through 29, 30, 31, Mary?
We don't have an adult high school program, it's just irrelevant right now.
Okay.
Mistake. But
Line 14 has a spacing issue.
We'll catch it. Thank you.
And that takes us to cell phone use. I provided you, I think I did, yeah, the public chapter. And I provided you sample TSBA policies. So that would have been on the left side of your folder. I got these 2 policies from TSBA. They're just samples, and we have our own, which is a pretty good policy, but it's up for discussion yet again. But I don't know how much you want to discuss it tonight, Joe, or if you want to take these sample ones that I've gotten from TSBA. But Larry,
Well, we put this in place, and our administrators are trying to follow the policy. but this is just not working. Even when students are required to put their cell phones turned off and put into their lockers, it's still an everyday occurrence that there'll be students that violate the policy.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
So I think Chairman Smith might speak more to this, but I'm concerned that this is causing this policy in an effort to be deferential that to parents on being able to contact their children in times of emergency, that this is just not working, especially at the middle school and high school levels. And I'm increasingly have the feeling that we should just ban the phones completely from the schools. And if a parent wants their child to have their phone in their possession, then maybe we can allocate funds to purchase secure devices for the students to store their bags as the bags where they can store their cell phones to carry with them, but they were not able to access them unless it's an emergency during the school day. So we can talk more about that, but it's just what I'm hearing from admin is that it's a struggle every day. And it's just more stuff that if we have a policy that we can't enforce, or in some cases we just give up the ghost and don't even try to enforce it, then I think we ought to just say, look, electronic devices, you shouldn't be wearing a hoodie so that you can hide your ear pods, because your phone is in your backpack and it's turned on and you're listening to music. I've actually seen it happen in the classroom where a student was spoken to and he couldn't hear because his music was blaring away in his ears. I think it's time to follow suit with a lot of states and many school districts that are just banning the use of phones.
Joe?
Nothing's changed with me. They need to go away. They don't need them. They're a distraction. We're running a generation. They're addicted. They're harmful. We don't need them. I like this policy. The red line version, of course. And I hope that this is what we will adopt. I do want to say, nothing to do with cell phones, that we don't let them have them, but this summer, in my summer program with the 20 kids I've got, we have gone electronicless. And man, we've gone back old-fashioned. We're using a textbook. Can you believe that? And we're using a pen and paper. We're not using any electronics at all. And it's amazing in 2 weeks how much work we're getting done. These cell phones need to go away, guys. I'm telling you, we're ruining these kids. And it's our fault. And we're going to pay for it. They need to go away. They need to go away. I'm done.
I agree.
And when this one comes back,
We will have to bring this back as a first read again. The law itself requires some changes to this that can't be voted yes as it's written. Actually, we're going to have to be a little bit more permissive as it's written in this red line.
I think the way we do middle school, where they can have it for emergency, like it's stored in their bags or lockers, whatever, and it's not out during the school day. That's how middle school works. They have it, it's like I send one with my daughter for safety purposes, right? It's in her bag, it's in her locker, and it's not out at all during the school day. So I agree with nothing during the school day, but to have it for safety purposes, is where I'm at, Joe,
Which
and that's
is
me
what
as
the
a
law is
mom
written as, I believe.
in 2025 with
When
3
you
kids.
say more permissive, what
Yeah,
do you mean?
It says they must have it for use of an emergency. Is that correct, Mary?
It says, yeah, they're supposed to have, our policy is supposed to permit them to use a wireless communication device in the event of an emergency or to manage their health.
Like in their backpack?
Well, it doesn't say that, it just says our policy has to give them the opportunity to be able to use a wireless communication device, and the public chapter defines that as a portable wireless device that has the capability to provide voice, messaging, or other data communication. So it says they have to be able to access a wireless device for an emergency or to manage their health.
And you guys have the public chapter, and
But
it's
heck,
number
but
5.
that doesn't mean it has to be their wireless device.
I
They
I
can go
think-
to the office and use the office wireless device.
The language in this does not specify that it has to be the
That's right.
student's device. That is.
That's right, that's right.
Yeah.
Now, I
We
can
would-
see a student who may have some medical issues having one
That's
to
right.
do
Yeah.
their.
Well,
their-
that's
their-
right.
That's the exception.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's an exception.
Okay.
I have a request, though, Shannon. When you
Sure.
bring this back, can we get rid of all the lines that are crossed out? It's just distracting when I go to read it.
Sure.
Like on the next one that you. bring.
Yes, and maybe would you be okay if I gave you another version of that too? I think we try to keep track for people for clarity of like what is going out of it too, but I understand when we redline so much, it gets confusing.
I want to be clear, Mr. Chairman. I cannot vote for a policy that doesn't allow me to send my child with a phone for emergencies stored away.
Okay. You get a vote just like everybody else. Look here, I do want to suggest this.
I just want to know, everybody know, I'm raising kids in the school system right now. Some of you are not.
Hey, what's your name?
Oh, I'll take it as love.
That's just what happens when you get old. You said that this had to come back for a first read. Is that what you said?
We've taken it for a first read. Yes, we
Can
haven't done it.
Can it be at our next meeting, our June meeting, a first and final read?
No.
Here's why I want to do that, because it gives us a couple of months for parents, teachers, administrators to prepare for what's coming when school starts.
Joe, we didn't agree on your red lines. This was your proposal.
I
This was
understand
not
that.
from the administration. So we can't do a first and final on one board member's proposal.
I defer to the chair.
I mean, we just can't. We need to agree on a proposal before, for a final read. We can't put,
Well, we can do a first and final read, and we can vote it down if you want to. We can do a first and final read.
we need to
anytime.
agree on the read. We do that with all the policies. We go through policy committee until we get a read that we want to send for a final read. That's what policy committee's for.
Our typical process is first read, the next month a second
I
read,
know
right?
what our
And so
typical process
it would still give time if we brought it as a traditional first read.
So if we bring as a first read in June and a final read in July, then we're only giving our parents, our administrators, whoever, 2 weeks to prepare. That's just not very long.
I'm not happy with this language at all. And it's not as permissive as what the statute allows. So your policy as written, Joe, is not in compliance.
What I just suggested, Shannon, would you be up for us creating just another version that we feel like better aligns to the law? So you have, this could be on first and final, and another one could be on first and final.
Sure.
You guys could vote on the version that you want. I think we just need to be really clear that what needs to be added to this from your perspective is that stays on the child, right? Has access to in case of emergency.
Not on the child.
Access to in case of emergency.
Yeah. I mean, in middle school, it's not on them. It's stored. I think the term that was in the former policy on the person was problematic for some administrators. But just in case of emergency, available.
So we will submit 2 first and final read versions in the June board meeting.
May I ask a
This
question?
with
A
with
clarification
getting it
question,
to
please.
meetings, sure.
Yes, Mr. Graham?
Should the board, or could the board, consider stiffening, so, just an example. Middle school principal says, you know, we've had them lock up their phones in their lockers for years, and we still have issues. Do we need to look at more stringent outcomes for violations of the cell phone policy for students that refuse to put their phones into their lockers?
That would certainly be up to the board. I mean, I think it says consequences will align with the code of acceptable behavior. And I don't have that, I mean, I can pull it up.
Well,
I don't have
it
in front
gives,
of me, but-
it's like a tier 1, tier
Right,
2, tier
right.
3, you know,
Yeah.
it gets more complicated as you go.
Yeah.
So, but at one point, you know, the school district, the problem with the policy as we have it in place is that you get to a point to where the school keeps the phone for like 2 or 3 months. I don't think a lot of parents are going to be happy with that, but heck, they'll probably go out and just
No,
buy
they let
another
you
phone.
suspend their kid to get the phone back.
Well, parents are supposed to come pick up the phone. But
That's what
this
they do.
happens a lot, so. I understand your concerns, but there are also other wireless devices that cannot take photos and can only send text, which I think parents need to consider if they're going to want their child to get a hold of them in terms of an emergency. There are other communication devices that don't have internet access or don't take photos, and et cetera.
To be
So-
clear, Mr. Groan, my child's phone has the family safety plan from Verizon where you can make it pretty much a flip phone. She does not have access to
Well, I
those things.
understand, but you might be the exception.
It just, we are in 2025. Parents want to be able to reach their child or their child reach them in the time of an emergency. The law says they have to be able to. And it is not prudent to think they're going to go ask for a teacher's phone or go to the office. That takes more time than what I think the law is contemplated.
Well, if they can't have it on their person,
A step out to your locker is a lot shorter than all the way down to the office. These schools are some big schools with some long hallways. That's,
But if you're in
that
a
is
lockdown, if you're in a lockdown situation, you're not going to be able to get to your phone.
there are other situations besides lockdown. There are other emergencies that children have besides lockdown. So I don't think the law contemplated making them go use somebody else's phone. I just don't think that was the public policy behind this. Mary, is there anything that talks to the public policy behind or any definitions to what they were intending for a wireless communication device?
Other than what they put in there, I'm not familiar. I mean, I can go look at the legislature's page and see if there's any
Yeah,
comments or
we'll have to
anything
take a
else
look
like that, but-
because there have been a lot of school shooting incidents where so many cell phones have lit up that it actually interfered with the response because the tower was getting pinged by hundreds of phones and it actually
No one is debating that they
made a
should be
bigger
out
problem.
during instructional time. No one's debating that. It's just for emergencies. Felice?
Lockers can be a problem sometimes because not every school has a locker in a convenient place for every student. I mean, that was the case at Udoa. They're all over the building. And I really think one of the best things that have worked for people, I've heard many times, is having some kind of pocket in each classroom. So the student puts their phone in the pocket, and we could even start off, if we need to, with a very simple, non-technological kind of pocket, and maybe it has assigned a number. When they come in, they put their phone in the pocket, so they know where it is, but they can't be accessing it during the class. And, you know, I've heard a lot that it's worked. That's something simple we could start with, and they'll have access so it follows the new law and as well.
Gary? Joe?
I thought I was off, I'm sorry. No, I've said all I'm gonna say, I mean, they need to go away, they need to go away.
All right. So that's the last policy. Is there anything else anybody wants to discuss tonight? All right, we're adjourned.